I think he's talking to his base. I think it's a nice sort of target. Oh,
you don't think there's any truth to this?
Well, no, I think the thing is, if you're looking at, he's talking about these companies and how they're doing a bad job, look at what the investors think. They don't think they're doing a bad job. I think that's the referendum,
do you think that right? Twitter or Facebook, or you don't think there's any bias in terms of...
I think well, here's the way I look at it. If you have somebody programming an algorithm on a search algorithm and that person is way left...
Right.
Then it has to come through in that algorithm.
I've seen it.
I'm going to throw some cold water on that, right? So when you're writing algorithms, politics doesn't translate into code.
Now, Ed's at the New York Times and sees no bias whatsoever at the New York Times either. So consider the source.
I am a reporter.
But what I found curious is that when they responded to it, they said, we publish the most relevant. Right. Who's deciding relevant?
So they're open. It's a great question. I think they're... Google and Facebook, Twitter, they're opening themselves up to attack, not because they're necessarily biased, because we don't know. Their algorithm is a black box, right?
Because it's a black box.
You know, that's the liability there. So President Trump can go on air and say, like, yeah, you know, look at the bias.
We don't know if that's actually happening. If you're saying you're showing the most relevant searches, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because we are showing you this stuff, and that becomes more relevant because more people click on it.
Right. So there you get into this what they call the bubble effect, right? And so you only know what you want to know. But you could argue that the rise of conservative media happened a lot because of social media.
Yes,
because of
they were given a much bigger
Facebook.
voice and able to reach more people than they ever had.
That they otherwise would have, right? That otherwise they would be just on the fringes. And so it's a specious argument. I think if you want free speech to be the fulcrum of the debate, as President Trump wants, that's a red herring. The real issue here is regulation. Does he want to regulate it? I don't think he does. I think you're right, Joe. At the same time, it's a great talking point. It's a great thing for both the left and the right to sort of, they don't like Silicon Valley. Neither side.
There's 100. There's 100. I don't know how long it'll be at Facebook. There's 100 engineers and the like at Facebook that now have a new organization trying to say, please drive this car a little bit more to the center than the way it's being driven right now. What about those guys? What about when Mark Zuckerberg said, you know, we hire people out near our headquarters and we can't find a conservative out here?
You know, I think it's going back to your point earlier, Joe, like if an engineer who happens to be sort of left of center or right of center, how that translates to the coding, that's not always an apparent thing, right? Because the act of writing code in terms of trying to solve a problem has less to do with where you're...
deciding what your relevant sources are, deciding what the authorities are, and it probably is more biased towards the establishment than anything else.
And I think that's exactly, that's the nuanced point that people are overlooking, is that the Google search algorithm tends to favor stories that get a lot of links from other stories, right? So it's the established media outlets like CNN, New York Times, CNBC for that matter, who they're established, so they get a lot of links. They're also frontline news organizations.
Were you uncomfortable at all with how cozy Eric Schmidt was with the Obama administration? Or he was going to be almost part of the Hillary campaign organization. Yeah. Sheryl Sandberg offered up her services.
Yes.
Now, maybe they don't write code, but you don't think that's representative of the people that
steer ship? They might not write code, but they steer the ship.
They do, and people want to.
If you are a conservative outlet, or if you're a conservative voice, or you're just a person, right, who's a conservative, and does that change how you use Facebook? Does it take you off of Facebook?
When I search for something, I can, and I'm not saying what I am because I.
Okay.
Yeah, so
it's so unclear, Joe.
And also, I'm not saying I'm part of any type of base, but it resonates. Maybe when it resonates with me, I'll tell you.